Hello and welcome to my channel. Except that's not quite the case. Apparently, time-traveling rhinos don't mind having guest videos on their channel that have people who have incredibly similar formats. But speaking of things that are incredibly similar, today we are looking at a YouTube video called A Mind-Blowing Video to Kill All Atheists, which might end up seeming really similar to a standard 5 questions atheist can't answer video. Now where's that intro?
The moon is 400 times closer to Earth than the sun.
Not 10 seconds into the video and you're already incorrect. The sun is 92.96 million miles away from the Earth, and the moon is 238,900 miles away from the Earth. If we multiplied the Earth's distance from the moon times 400, we get a number closer to 95,560,000 miles from the Earth. So your calculations are missing about 3 million miles, and that's a pretty big amount to be off by. The moon would have to be 6,000 miles closer to the Earth for your calculations to be correct, and this is going to be important later.
And the sun is 400 times larger than the moon. What does this mean? It means that when the moon comes in between the sun and the Earth, they both seem the same size to us, such that we form a perfect eclipse.
Even with your math being a little wonky, this is true. Earth does occasionally experience total eclipses. So what is the significance of that?
Now, you might be thinking, yeah, that's standard stuff, mate. It's not standard stuff, because in our solar system, there are approximately 166 moons, and that never happens to any other planet.
So I looked into it, and a perfect eclipse the way that Earth experiences it is incredibly rare, if not impossible to find on other planets due to the oblong shape of many of their moons. Although total eclipses do happen quite often on other planets, just not perfect ones like the ones you're mentioning. But like I asked before, why does it matter?
Because either the moon seems too big or the sun seems too big. But why is it that only on Earth it's so specific? It's as if Allah is trying to tell us something.
You seem to think that this correlation between the moon and the sun causing these eclipses means that Allah is trying to tell us something. But in all actuality, the moon is moving 4 centimeters away from the Earth each year. This means in about 600 million years, the Earth will no longer experience these eclipses. I know that might seem like a long time, but remember that the age of the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. So we only need a little over 1/7 of the time that the Earth has been around in order for these incredibly special eclipses to be non-existent on Earth. That doesn't seem incredibly perfect to me. And the reason that I brought up the inaccurate measurements from before is because the way he's using those words implies that the two measurements are exactly identical, 400 times compared to 400 times. This is a verbal trick that's usually used to make you nod your head as soon as you realize the implications of that. Because it would sound a lot less grandiose if you said that the moon is 400 times smaller than the sun, and that the sun is 389 times farther than the moon. It just doesn't have the same ring to it. And this is a common tactic used in any type of apologetics that causes people to nod their head when they simply don't know any better. It's so close to accurate that you can't even tell the difference usually. But it is no less a dishonest statement based on its agenda.
As we know, when the universe was created, we had hydrogen and helium. But we need carbon for life to exist. Hydrogen and helium is all well and good, but to form carbon, you need 3 heliums to come together to form carbon. So there's this scientist called Sir Fred Hoyle. He wanted to see how these 3 heliums come together. So, of course, in the lab, they do what they gotta do, but he noticed that nothing really was happening. So then, it occurred to him that maybe these 3 heliums will come together at a specific resonance. In other words, there has to be a specific nuclear ground state energy. So he tried that and it worked. And he noticed that if it was different, for even 1%, the heliums would not come together to form carbon.
A specific set of circumstances were required for a very specific chemical reaction to happen. This is not news. This is an incredibly common thing across many different elements. It is not central to helium. Helium just happened to require more kinetic energy in order to fuse, and it just so happens that red giant stars had the kinetic energy required to fuse helium into carbon. As dying stars expand into red giants, they begin to manufacture carbon atoms by fusing helium atoms together. These stars usually have a temperature at 100 million degrees, converting helium into carbon atoms, but they also can create iron and oxygen. So the fact that they make carbon isn't entirely special.
After discovering this, Hoyle later confessed that nothing has shaken his atheism more than this discovery.
Anybody who's spent any amount of time on skeptic channels will know that the creationists' favorite tool is the quote mine. Through using quotes from famous scientists or philosophers, you can have them say things that have nothing to do with their actual position. And simply having a position which can be shaken is not a bad thing. In fact, it's an incredibly good thing. It means that you're open to outside evidence. The fine-tuning argument, for example, is something that I had an incredibly hard time wrapping my head around as an atheist. So quote mining Hoyle for your agenda is a little bit disingenuous. I could say that the fine-tuning argument used to shake my atheism, and it would not award you any points in the argument. So it most certainly won't award you any points here, where we can't ask Hoyle for context.
As we know, the sun and the earth is at a reasonable distance. Yeah, if it was too close, we'd all burn. If it was too further away, we'd all freeze.
You're right, and this is a concept we know of as the Goldilocks zone. Theoretically, any sun like ours has a Goldilocks zone where life can form because the environment will be suited to it. This requires a few things. It definitely requires having a planet within that zone, and as far as we know, it would require water to be on that planet. But let's see what kind of point he's trying to make here.
If this relationship between Earth and the sun changed for even 2%, there'd be no life on this planet, guys. That's how much is finely tuned.
When hearing the fine-tuning argument, you'll usually hear that there's a 5% wiggle room for the Earth, or a 2% wiggle room for the Earth, or something to that nature. Here's why none of that matters. Based on our current data, there can be as many as 40 billion Earth-sized planets orbiting habitable zones of sun-like stars and red dwarfs in the Milky Way galaxy alone. So if your argument is that there's a 2% leeway for the Earth, so a 1 in 50 chance, and we have here demonstrated about 40 billion chances for this to happen, those seem like pretty good odds. And even if the odds were astronomically out of our favor, the thing that finally cemented this not being an issue for me was learning about hand probability in card games. If we were to relate this to something like poker, the odds of drawing a royal flush in a 5-card hand are 1 over 649,740. Those are incredibly low odds, and the reason the royal flush feels special when you draw it is because of those odds. Now, while having an Earth-like planet such as we have now has statistically lower odds than that, no matter what state we found the world in, the odds would be exactly the same for it to be in that state, whatever it may be. If in a 5-card hand I draw a 4 of hearts, a 5 of hearts, a 2 of hearts, and a 3 of hearts, and a 3 of spades, the odds for me to get that exact hand is 1 in 649,740. Any given 5-card hand would have identical odds. Thus, the only odds required are the odds of the planet that you have right now. The only reason that we find Earth as anything special is the same reason that we find the royal flush special. We have assigned the speciality to that term. Every iteration of Earth has an equal probability of happening, and every hand you draw has an equal probability of being the hand that you draw. All that matters now is the fact that it has already happened, and the statistical probability of things that have already happened is 1. And that's when these things suddenly stop seeming so special.
As we know, everything is made from atoms, but there's two forces that are holding atoms together. You've got the electromagnetic force, which holds the structure of the atom, and then you've got the nuclear strong force, which holds the nucleus of the atom. These two have to be at a specific ratio for life to exist. Now what's this ratio? Let me tell you, it's 1 over 10 to the power 16. 10 to the power 16 is 10, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 16 times. Now that is very, very specific.
You're right, and as I demonstrated earlier, it being specific doesn't mean anything. The chance of something occurring can be incredibly low, and it will not change the fact that it has already occurred.
Now, if this fine-tuning wasn't there, there'd be no stars. If there's no stars, there'd be no planets. If there's no planets, there would be no life.
Well, technically this statement is correct. Without stars, we wouldn't be able to forge the carbon required to make the rest of the universe as we know it. But how you go from the ratio required to make life to saying that stars wouldn't exist, that part is beyond me.
At the dawn of the Big Bang, there was something called dark energy which is pushing our universe out there. Now this is so finely tuned that if this force was too much, the universe would have exploded and nothing would have formed. If it was too less, it would have collapsed upon itself, and again, nothing would have formed. Now how much is this force? Well, let me tell you, mate. It's 1/10 to the power 120. That is very, very specific.
You keep saying that, but every single time you say that something is very specific, I think we've already demonstrated that it doesn't matter how specific it is. Moreover, and the ultimate question here is, even with everything being so incredibly specific, how does that get you closer to God? That's one thing that I don't understand about the fine-tuning argument, especially now that I no longer wrestle with it in the way that I used to. How does a probabilistically low chance for the universe forming in the exact way that we find it lead you to God? I mean, we could argue from Spinoza's God in philosophy, but that God is basically just the universe, so we can just call that the universe, and we still find ourselves in the exact same situation we're in now. So far, nothing that you've said has been incredibly mind-blowing, nor do I think it will kill all atheists.
Astrophysicist Hugh Ross says that the chance of our planet existing in the universe, it's so rare. How rare though? Well, he calculated it was 1/10 to the power 30. That's the chance that a planet like ours could form in the universe.
You're right. In fact, he says as much in his book Improbable Planet. A book I own, by the way. Hugh is also a theist, but here's the thing, he's not a Muslim. So even if I granted you that you both were right to believe that there was a God who was the first cause of our universe, at what point can we actually determine which God it is? And I'm sure you two would be able to hash that out between the Bible and the Quran just fine, right?
The fine-tuning argument, guys, it's such a solid proof for the existence of a designer.
Whoa, hold on, buddy. Arguments are not proof. Arguments are not evidence. In philosophy, where we hash out arguments all the time, there are arguments that are sound. This means that all the premises for the argument are true. So here I would say that all of your arguments are sound, since most of what you've said is that it's very unlikely that our universe would form in the way that it has. But if those premises don't lead to the conclusion, or the conclusion's not right, what we then have is an invalid argument. So my response to you would be, the fine-tuning argument is sound the way you've described it, but it's invalid. You still have some pretty acrobatic gymnastics to do with your mind in order to get from low probability planets to God.
That atheists go to great lengths to disprove these minute probabilities.
The actual lengths that are being trodden are the lengths that it's taking you to jump through all the hoops required to come to your conclusion. No atheist is going to try to disprove that the universe isn't finely tuned, when we can simply say, yes, it is finely tuned, but any other possible universe would be finely tuned as well. So having a finely tuned universe doesn't get me to God.
In fact, the best thing they've come up with is the multiverse theory.
I don't think I've ever actually heard the multiverse theory used as a way to prove that the Big Bang happened and led to the universe we see now. Again, it comes down to possible hands in a deck of cards and possible universes that could come out of the same bang. And even then, any authority that ascribes to the multiverse hypothesis typically only does so not because he has evidence for it, but because they have no reason to logically exclude it. But in no way is it an argument for our universe being the way it is. More that it's just a fun postulation.
Which what they've said is, there's an infinite amount of universes out there, so the chance of a universe or a solar system or a planet like ours forming is actually probable. But guys, there's no proof for the multiverse theory.
Watch your step, because there's no proof for your God either. You're walking very dangerously close to an atheist perspective here. Here, let me give you two different mindsets, two different sentences to demonstrate what I mean. You could say that, guys, you shouldn't believe in the multiverse as a method to argue that the universe came in the way we see it today, because we have no evidence for it. But now you've opened the door for me to say, guys, we shouldn't believe that God was the reason the universe came into being the way we know it today, because there's no evidence for it. Sometimes you need to be very careful what words you're using, because language can get you in a lot of trouble.
It's just a hypothesis at this moment in time, and it's just another creative way to delay the existence of God.
How could I possibly delay the existence of God? Doesn't he already exist in your view? Maybe what you're meaning is that I would be delaying my belief in the existence of God, and I'm sure that's closer in line with what you actually meant.
Because it's inevitable. Yeah, if you're a reasonable person, it's inevitable for you to start questioning that there has to be a creator.
Yeah, now I can tell that your verbiage is definitely slipping, because I did question whether we had a creator, and you know what it did? It made me an atheist. Though I know there's a Muslim apologetic for that already. Something like, step 1, realize there are no gods, and then step 2, realize the only god is Allah, because that's totally not a contradiction. Anyways guys, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, and let me know what you think in the comments section below. I'd like to once again thank Vice Rhino for allowing me an opportunity to present on his channel, and hopefully you all enjoyed my inane banter. And if you did, why not go check me out? There might be a link to my channel in the video description. If not, well, insert end of video tagline here.